Why are so many people awakening right now at this time?
I see it as like a collective dark night of the soul. This is actually a purification process. We can actually recreate a world here not based on greed and egoic interest.
You had an encounter with Seraphim.
So they were these beautiful light fractal beings. They burn eternally with the love of God. They basically said, we can show you what we are, and you can become like us. The self structures started to burn with this white light, and the idea is to find out who you are beyond name and form. That is the most important thing. Who I've been looking for has been here the whole time. It's like a cosmic joke. The delusion that we fall into on the path is that we mistake the state for who we are. If we know who we are, we can allow these states to come and go. Meditation is simply being.
Are you awakened right now?
Like, I've had all these awakenings. I've been on this path for 25 years. I've been humbled so many times on the path. I think to be awake is to be.
Hey, Dan. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I actually want to start the interview with how we actually met, because I met you physically. Of course, I saw you, heard your voice in the Samadhi video on YouTube, which I found accidentally. And when I saw that video, I never usually watch a full YouTube video for like an hour at a time. But this one, just a few where I didn't even know what Samadhi was. And there was something that just got me hooked into the video, and I was watching it until the end. And at the end of the video, I was like, I need to find whoever made this documentary. And it so happens that your center was not too far from my place. So that very weekend, I drove to the center and I stayed for a weekend. And I got the honor to meditate with you for 2 straight mornings. And I think this is an interesting segue to get into the topic of awakening, because, you've obviously awakened. I have had an awakening 15 years ago. And it comes like in waves, but very subtle. Sometimes it's stronger, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's completely absent. But there are moments, very few moments throughout my life where it peaks. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about. It just comes on and you're like, oh, this is a sweet spot. I'm there. And then the
Yeah.
mind comes in again. But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
but when we were meditating on the second morning, I don't know if you remember, but it was one of those moments where the awakening happened. And it always happens spontaneously, because I was not expecting to. I wasn't aiming to have an awakening. And from a lot of the research and the readings that I've done from the topic of awakening, is a lot of people say that when you're around another awakened or enlightened person, there's like this transmission, like energetic transmission, where it actually helps you awaken. And I can't explain what that is. And I didn't even know it was possible until it happened to me when I was with you and meditating. And that was kind of a shocker for me. I did not expect that. And then, of course, it kind of died down. And then I went home and did all these practices. But what do you know about, have you ever had any experiences similar to that?
I've had an experience actually right around the time I had what I would say my full big Kensho experience at a Zen center, and the teacher there was in presence. So they have in that tradition, it's called a dokusan, where you sit in front of the teacher, and he was just there. It was just pure presence, and I just sat down, and I had, my mind had all these different questions, and when I sat down in front of him, all the questions, I couldn't remember anything. It was just this presence, and And it was almost like an entrainment where I realized that in that moment, that was it. I was just looking into his eyes. It was like presence meeting presence,
Mm-hmm.
and the the words, the questions in the mind, all of that seemed completely irrelevant. And I think I probably said some nonsense at that point as well. But whatever it was that met, it was like sometimes they say it's like two arrows meeting in midair.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there was something that dropped in that moment, and that sort of transmission had a ripple effect where the mind that had been so it on a mission for enlightenment, it started to settle and drop, so for me, I think that was one of those examples for sure. Yeah.
It's such an interesting phenomenon. It's And I remember when I was in that awakened state, uh, when I was 20, so it was 15 years ago, but it was for quite a bit of time. It was like 5 to 6 months. And I just remember people gravitating towards me. And
Mhm.
not in the egoic sense. And it's like intuitively, I knew it was just my light shining their light and just reflecting back to each other. Like you said, that arrow to arrow.
Yeah.
Um,
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's a long stretch.
it
That's
was.
sometimes people will have, a glimpse of Kensho and it's like, 30 seconds. So
Mhm.
yeah, months is amazing. That's really amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. 6 months it was 5 to 6 months. And then once I got reattached to my ego, I actually fell into my first seasonal depression. So
Mhm.
I went from the highest of highs and then
Yeah.
to the lowest of lows. And I was like, what is going on? And I knew nothing about spirituality, right? Like I had no knowledge, no interest. I didn't even know what it was called. I was like, does this even happen to other people? And
Mhm.
then obviously I started to research and found out like Buddhism and that it was called, that there was a name for it, and that actually there were tons of people throughout history who had awakened. And I guess that sets somebody, once they have an awakening, especially like where it's a little more intense, where they're able to see the contrast between the lower reality and then this higher reality, that you become a seeker after that.
Yeah.
It's almost like inevitable because you're like, what was that? What was
Yeah.
that I just lived from the real reality? And then why am I back here? And it's so disorienting that it can only set somebody onto the seeker's path.
Yeah.
And and I guess some people call this the spiritual journey, right? But a lot of people don't necessarily have the spiritual awakening and they just innately know that there's something in there. What was your like spiritual journey like? How did it begin and how are you here now with this center that you're living in? And how did this all come to be?
Mhm.
Big question.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So for me, yeah, I had no, I came from a Christian background, so
Mm.
had no idea. My family is full of like nuns, Catholic nuns, and
Wow,
and
really?
and Catholic. My uncle is a monk, like a Catholic brother.
No way.
I had a mother, like yeah, my great aunt was a nun as well.
Huh.
So it wasn't on my radar at all. And the what got me into it, I had a huge kind of health crisis, crash, you could say. At one point, I was like deeply in the material world, pursuing money and all the usual stuff, and something in me, it wasn't in alignment. So my body, as the intelligence of the body started to give me signals like that it wanted to shift, and I didn't recognize them. So over time, the signals got bigger and bigger until I was forced to pay attention.
Hmm.
And so I developed this mind-body state with like a sickness pattern, and insomnia was part of it, which was really challenging at the time. So I really just wanted to quiet the mind. The mind had become really pathological, and I just wanted some peace of mind. And I just happened to have a friend who went to a Vipassana retreat, and he came back, and he's in this state where he was just quiet and peaceful and present. And I was like, okay, I want what you have. And that was it. That was all. And then at that retreat, I went to one of the 10-day SN Goenka retreats, and went through absolute hell. It was, the whole mind-body pattern, which was rheumatoid arthritis, type 1 diabetes, all of these different things. I got to feel that pattern fully, all the things that I didn't want to feel, all the mind processes that were in play, all the, deep samskaras and just things that were alive in the unconscious all came up to the surface. So that, I went through hell for the first part of it, just struggling to be okay. Like the practice is to just be equanimous with whatever is arising. And I had, maybe a millimeter of equanimity, just the tiniest little crack, just surrendering over and over and over. The mind was like a monkey, so coming back to the present moment over and over. And then, I gave it like 100% effort. I would say the whole effort of my entire being. It was the hardest thing I ever did. And at one point, the teacher, SN Goenka, says, that all pain, all of your suffering is impermanent, and that it can drop away. And it did for a brief period of time, not months, but maybe 12 hours, where everything dropped. The mind-body pattern dropped away, and so I was in what I now understand to be a Sabakalpa Samadhi state. So you're in the state of union. And it was the most incredible state. It was like the peak human experience. I was one with everything. It was like the energy, everything was alive. I walked out of the zendo at night, and the stars, I was as much the stars as they were me. I didn't know if I was the moon looking down at the Dan character, or the Dan character looking up at the moon. It was all one. And so exactly like what you described, like except mine was compressed into a much shorter time. But I went from the highest, most beautiful experience possible, this union with all that is, to losing it. Then I went to sleep that night, lying in bed for a long time. I was just in it, but then eventually the pattern of the mind body came back, and then it's the feeling was I lost it. I lost,
Yeah.
so and that I that lost it, I didn't know at that point who I am. Who I truly am. So I was identified with the little Dan character that, so I felt like, like when I was in that state, I was actually, the character was quite delusional, because I thought, I did it. I'm enlightened. I'm like the Buddha. I'm like Jesus. Because when in that state, you're one with everything. But the delusion is I thought I was that character having that experience.
Like, I achieved it. This is my doing.
Yeah, and it's that false I hadn't been revealed at that point, and it was like years later, many years later, that I ended up finding out who I am. And so that little I, the character, totally became a seeker at that point, and was desperate to get that experience back, and that state, and the delusion that we fall into on the path is that we mistake the state for who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So these states are always going to come and go, but the knower of that state, the truth of who I am, is the awareness that is ever present.
Yeah.
So if we know who we are, we can allow these states to come and go, so the more we grasp at them, the more for me, like a whole decade, I learned every meditation technique, every sutra, every breath work thing, like for attaining these states. And the harder, the more that little ego was grasping, the further away I was getting
Mm-hmm.
from that. And so it's such a paradox, and there's such an inherent pitfall in realizing these states, because it's a blessing and a curse. Like on one hand,
Yes.
it shifted me out of my old pattern
Mm-hmm.
big time. Like it changed the course of my life, but also a new spiritual identity was created, came into being as this seeker character. So yeah.
That is, I think you said that so well. And I think this is something that I don't hear very often when people say it's a blessing and a curse, because when you're operating from the I, the identity, it is a curse because all you want to do is get back there and you fail miserably every time. So that becomes your hell. Yet it's a blessing to have experienced that state of awakening and enlightenment. Um, Adyashanti, I think he calls it like this non-permanent state where like these awakenings are glimpses, like temporary. He calls it non-abiding. And then he calls the people who are able to, well, it's not really an ability, but you know what I'm saying. People who are able to stay enlightened or awaken throughout the rest of their lives, really. Um, that's the abiding state. And so what do you think it is? Because when I was awakened, I should say, for 5 to 6 months, I thought when I was in that state, oh, this is forever. This is gonna go on forever. I don't ever have to worry about a thing. But then, like, just one day to another, my ego I got reattached to my ego and it just disappeared. That was something that I really didn't prepare myself for. But
Yeah.
what do you think it is that make somebody able to stay in that state sort of permanently versus these temporary states that we just come in and out of?
Yeah, so that is the question.
Hmm.
That's the question. So yeah, so there's a couple points, and I would say, on the path of liberation, there's sort of there's different stages that we move through. So the initial stage, like what I just described when I was a beginner, we have this beginner stage where it's like it's always the little self doing something. So this little self is doing techniques, it's doing this and that. We have an awakening, and then if the awakening is a recognition of our true nature, of the awareness that is here now, then it can be the end of seeking in that moment.
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean the end of sadhana and the end of the purification process.
Hmm.
So if you awaken, from that character, you realize, okay, I'm not that character. I'm have a direct experience of this awareness that is ever present. When we really get that, then everything on the path there's a different stage that we move into, because there's no more seeking with that little character. There's no more doing. It's like the analogy. I love this analogy. So there's a analogy. If you imagine you're in a VR game, and we're in this game right now. So I'm in this game. I'm in this Dan avatar. So and if you're in a VR game, like the avatars are interchangeable. So the question is, who are you in that VR game? If I put on the headset, the world can change, my character can change, but there's a sense of I in that headset. If I'm, if you put on the headset, it's neat. The first time I put on a VR headset, after I took it off, I felt the same way in the body for a
I
long
see.
time. So we're, so there's a consciousness that is a pure awareness or consciousness that is the one, to whom all these experiences are happening.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're in the VR game, who am I? I'm not the character or the avatar.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do on the spiritual path is, if we're identified with that little character, we're making that little character in the VR game do all these things. Like imagine you're in the VR game and it's like, okay, I'm gonna wake up and by making my little character do yoga, or making my little character, it's crazy because it doesn't matter what you make that little character do, you're not that character. We
Mm-hmm.
just have to somehow recognize that we're the consciousness playing that character. So all of these practices and things that we do on the path, they're stepping stones for sure. I think that it's, they loosen the bonds of the attachment to the character. But at some point on the path, that whatever, and this happened to me. I did every technique, my character did every technique, and at some point will fail to awaken. That character will never awaken. We awaken from the character. So it's a, I think it's a neat thing, on the path to realize, like, yeah, we do all this sadhana, this, work, but really it's about failing, and the faster that little character can fail, and give up and let go and stop the doing, so once that character and whatever its pattern is, that it's, seeking pattern that it's acquired, once that pattern drops, and then what remains,
Mm-hmm.
once all of that
It's
lets
your
go.
essence. Then
Yeah,
you're left with your true nature. It's
yeah,
kind of like an onion, I guess. Like you just keep peeling off. Like I feel like everything that you just said, like failing, it's almost like a process of elimination. It's like, okay, that this didn't work, that didn't, and then eventually you just come to your center and you're like, I'm left with nothing. And you're, like you said, you're left with this essence that is consciousness in some
yeah,
ways.
yeah,
Um,
and that essence, that consciousness, we like the biggest turning point on the path is when we stop seeking with the mind, with the little character, and we recognize that consciousness is just here. It's just ever present. The delusion that we fall into over and over is we feel the aliveness and the folly of getting caught in thoughts and everything, and so there's something alive in certain people, that at a certain point, and that brings them to this path, and the delusion is that the mind recognizes that, and it says, okay, let's do it, let's turn this into a project, and
mhm.
the mind wants to get involved with it, but if we could somehow just stay with that initial kind of beginner's mind, or just that feeling that is, it's like an energy that is sort of drawing us to the source, and just allow the mind, the conditioned mind, to just be a don't know mind,
Mm-hmm.
and just stay, quiet, and just allow the energies to move, and allow this sort of settling. And most people, and myself, this happened over and over. There's a clearing process after the awakening, and usually it's an accelerated, usually many years
Mm-hmm.
of an accelerated purification process that happens after an awakening. And to me, that's the beginning of true sadhana, is when
Mm-hmm.
we know who we are. We know we're not that little character. So we let go of all the doing techniques, and we start to actually recognize that it's just about abiding in being, and we allow that energy to move, and this rewiring process
Mm-hmm.
happens, and the chakras, the inner lotus, all of that starts to grow, and we literally rewire the
Yeah.
avatar to not be a robotic avatar like
Mm-hmm.
it was at the beginning, but it becomes more of a bridge
Right.
between this time bound world and what's beyond.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting that there really are, in some ways, like the spiritual path, these sort of unlinear paths, steps, sorry, that you take, like the purification process. And I feel like, the awakening is great, but without the integration and then without the purification and all these steps that you just described, it could truly amount to nothing. I mean, not that we're trying to amount to anything, but you could really be missing the mark without doing that.
Mhm.
And I think the hardest thing after my awakening, when I was so young, is I had no guidance. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know who to look for. And I feel like this is something now that's becoming more and more known, the spiritual path and like these steps. That's also known in spiritual alchemy, these like 7 steps of the process, which at the end comes down to the spiritual path, the spiritual journey. But it's also very interesting because sometimes I'll be meditating. I'm like craving to become to come back to myself, to remember myself. And I'll be meditating for like an hour and a half, and nothing, nothing happens. I get fed up. I go up, start to live my life. I'll do the dishes. And while I'm doing the dishes, there it goes. It's happening. And I'm like, oh, here it is. And sometimes I realize that it's really when you try too hard
Mhm.
that you fail terribly. And then when you're not thinking, when you've let go of the trying, of the doing, as you say, then there's like your essence comes. I don't know how to explain it, but it happens
Yeah,
for a short, brief moment. And you're like, oh, there it is. And then the
yeah,
second you say, there it is, it's gone.
yeah. Yeah, that's it. And I think the work that we do, with our practice and our sadhana, really, like it can be a formal practice, but really what it comes down to is, like you said, there is a sort of grace, or, the mind will just drop sometimes. And I think the more we understand the mechanism of how it works, all of our sadhana really is to come to understand this mechanism and how it works.
Mm,
And what you described in your meditation practice is a perfect example. It's like the ego, or the false self, when it's present, and it's sort of mediating our experience. The question is, what is that? What is that false
mhm,
I? And to me, And I think the greatest teachers like the Buddha, or Ramana, or all the great masters would say, it's really just not being okay with what is. That ego is just a resistance to what is in the
Mm-hmm.
moment.
Mm-hmm.
So the paradox is, we go to meditate, and we're not in the state. We're not, the ego, the mind is present. It's like there's a veil, of thought, and
Mm-hmm.
it's mediating the experience.
Yeah.
So we're like, I want that back. The little I that is that veil
Mm-hmm.
wants something other than what is. And the wanting of something other than what is the veil. So
Yeah.
so it's always, just a relaxing into what is already here, what's already present.
Yeah.
And it's such a paradox, and the mind has such momentum. And the mind, once it drops away, and then once it notices, once, if there's a state of presence, then the mind is like, ooh, a state of presence, look at that. And then it'll take ownership of it. It'll be like, ooh, I did it. I
Yeah.
I awakened again.
I
And
was able to do it.
yeah, this little false I, and it'll, we have these awakenings, and then it'll go out and read, Vedanta books, and adopt non-dual terminology, and say, I'm awake, I'm this and that, and before you know it, there's this whole, non-dual language happening, and it's the false I, just doing its thing, and it's
Mm-hmm.
making a facsimile, or making like a simulation almost
Yeah.
of what it is to be awake. And so many people, so many teachers fall into that,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not actually in the state. You're not actually, in the open state. But there's this filter, and the mind is brilliant at creating that facsimile, and it's sometimes hard to tell.
Yeah.
It's
I feel like even teachers, I think there's like a certain amount of wisdom that needs to be in place in a teacher for them not to get corrupt by the ego. Because once you're known as this great teacher, there's gonna be all this worshiping from all these followers that are gonna latch on to them, and the ego can so easily infiltrate their system, their body, their mind, and
yeah,
it just takes that one like, oh, maybe I am special, and then you're corrupt.
yeah,
But so yeah, I do because you see it all the time. I mean, not all
yeah,
the time, but you see it in documentaries, you see it in just people who speak the truth and that resonates, and then you see them what they do behind closed doors, and it's like, ooh, how can that be? And I think wisdom is also something that is an integral part of becoming like a teacher, or like enlightenment. For me, I
yeah,
think enlightenment is definitely a step ahead of a step forward from just awakening. I think awakening is the first phase where you're awakening. It's like when you're awakening from your sleep, it's a moment. It's like so it's instant. Whereas like an enlightenment is you've gone through all those processes, and you've integrated them, and you have a certain amount of wisdom, probably a large amount of it, and a lot of it probably comes from this essence. But yeah, it's the ego is it's so sneaky, and it is so tricky. And even to myself, I have to admit, like it comes in so often, and I have to catch myself where I'm like, No, this is the little I. This is the little self that's talking. Don't
Yeah.
believe everything that it's telling you. You're not special.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, I think knowing you hit on some really important points there. Yeah, I think like for me, the path of liberation, I see it like in terms of like the yogic traditions. They talk about how once that energy is awake and alive in us. There are these stages that we go through, and there's many different ways to talk about those stages. And Zen, they have the 10 ox herding pictures that they go through the different stages of liberation and enlightenment. The yogic teachings, they have this chakra model where the energy rises to these different psychophysiological, spiritual centers.
Mm.
And with each center, they say, like some of the teachers will say, it's each chakra is like a little world, and it takes
Mm.
3 to 7 years to explore that world and for that rewiring process to happen. So we're going from these lower centers where the sense of I is very limited. It's all about survival, and this little me. The energy starts to rise to the higher centers, and it's like our sphere of inclusion starts to expand. The sense of I will expand out to others, to relationships, to family, to
Mm.
community, to the world, to all beings eventually. And at each of these levels, this sense of I expands. There are different challenges that come, and different life experiences, and it is life. This whole thing is this inner lotus that grows is the full expression of a human life and all of its different facets. So it's important to remember, we're not. It's not about a goal. That's the problem when we experience these states.
Mhm.
It feels like this is the goal, like to be awake,
Yeah.
um, but um, but the life itself is this unfolding, and there are many blooms. Each of these levels, there's many blooms and many
Mm.
things that are new, and it's so important to for me, at different points in my path, I fell into a delusion where I thought I knew the landscape. I thought I knew much more than I actually knew.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that I've come to in my path is I really truly only know that I really don't know, you
Mhm.
know, and I've come to see that having a don't know mind, the conditioned mind only knows the past.
Mhm.
So if I only know the past, and I'm staying in that pattern, then I'm not allowing for anything new to unfold. So each of these levels is an unfolding, and it's something brand new, and there's a humbling of the
Mhm.
mind that is ongoing. It's like if I think I've made it, I'm beyond anything, then there's a new plateau. The energy doesn't evolve beyond that stage. So I think an openness, to just explore and be open to something completely unknown is a huge benefit on the path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think a lot of people fall into this trap where they get into this story of like, I had an awakening. I must be special. I have to play this role now where this is going to become my thing. And
Yeah.
I've certainly fell into that trap that I've actually only gotten out of, honestly, like yesterday.
Yeah, me
I
too.
realized.
I mean, that was my thing was, I got some benefit from the path and had an awakening and healed the mind body pattern and everything. And so, my little ego was like, woohoo, make films about this, tell everybody about this. And yeah, and so, and that's what happens. People have an awakening, and it's like, I'm going to write a book. Now I'm going to go on tour for that book, and now I'm going to do workshops and this and that.
Guilty.
Yeah, and it's fine, but it's where's the energy going? The energy that, there's a self structure, and not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. To me, I see the exploration as kind of like a tree that grows. So,
Mm,
so it's not about, just abandoning everything. And it's like
right.
the tree would have no branches then. It would just be like go straight up,
Mm-hmm.
It's not much of a tree. So to me, like there is a benefit to that, exploration of these
Yeah.
different levels. And so, yeah, for me, the films have taken me into a growth kind of within the self structure. And, it's a lot of branches and a lot of development, I would say, to become a delivery mechanism for the films. There was a lot of development that was necessary. So
Yeah.
so I think it's kind of like a balance there. It's not because we have this individual, avatar that we're, experiencing in this game, and we can do things with it. We can develop it. We can, there are all these different developmental lines that are, it's like in the Matrix where Neo would download the program to be able to do jujitsu or whatever it is, and we can do all that with the avatar and make it a fun game
Mm-hmm.
play. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that where we really stall out is if the sense of I then becomes identified with that
Yeah.
character. So then it's like I am this person doing these workshops, and
Yeah.
this I'm
These,
a teacher or
yeah.
guru, whatever it is. And if we really believe that, then we've plateaued again.
Yeah. I
So,
think that there's so much truth to that because when I was ignored, ignorant in my own awakening at the age of 20, because I had no preconceived notion of what spirituality or spiritual awakening or enlightenment was, everything I was doing was just normal stuff, but from a different state.
yeah.
So I wasn't seeking spirituality. I wasn't doing it. I was going to school. I was in university. But what's interesting though is that, and I don't know if this happened for you, but everything enhanced in my life. And I'm talking like physically, intellectually, energetically, everything increased. And there was some very serious like synchronicities that were happening. And then all these magical things were starting to happen. But by the time that they would happen, it's almost like I wouldn't even want them
Hmm.
because I was already so filled with just being.
Yeah.
I was radiating from my being that I was like, I got a free ticket to Hawaii, which has been my lifelong dream to surf. And by the time it came, this free ticket, I was like, I don't even know if I want to go actually. Whereas like my egoic self, the surfer identity would have loved to have gone to Hawaii. Where a better place than to surf than Hawaii?
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about actually and I feel like a lot of non-duality teachers stay away from these subjects, but everything's intertwined and I'm starting to sort of trying to at least merge the gap between this non-duality essence, true nature, awakening state and with other spiritual experiences. Because after I had my awakening, I can't deny that there were insane mystical experiences that started happening to me throughout my life.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it's linked, but I highly think so. And I was actually a little surprised actually to find this video on your channel where you had an encounter with Seraphim.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
I was like, now that's interesting because a lot of non-duality teachers will stay away because they think it's like a distraction to like
Yeah.
the actual goal. But I don't know. I kind of feel like it's important to also talk about it because when it does
Yeah.
happen, like uh
That's
but
what I felt too. And I struggled with putting it out there. I was like,
mhm.
there's no way I'm going to put out a video about angels. And like, that's insane. Like, that's going to totally destroy my credibility. But I felt a strong feeling around
Mhm.
it that it is important to talk about these things. Yeah.
I do. I do think it's important because if somebody does have an awakening and then later on they do have like such a powerful experience like that, there's no way you can just deny that and just
Yeah.
focus on non-duality. You have to acknowledge what that was.
Yeah.
And I would love to hear you speak about that experience because I actually didn't know what Seraphim or who Seraphim was before your video. And then I Googled it and of course, tons of images and answers and what it was. But uh, yeah, can you dabble a little bit into that experience that you had? Fascinating.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So, yeah. So, and this was totally not on my radar. And, since the experience, I've really kind of felt into what it is that's actually happening when we have these kinds of experiences.
Mhm.
So for me, what happened was I was in a meditative state, in a samadhi state, very present, no mind, thought, in that state of union. And what happened was something new came, and there was a feeling that came in the heart,
Mhm.
and I'd never experienced before. And it's not like I produced it or had anything to do with it. I was just abiding in presence. So there was no doing, nothing. But this feeling came, and it was like, I would say, like it sounds crazy, but it was just a love of God,
Mm.
or a love of all that is. And it was the most exquisite feeling. And as soon as that feeling came, it was like what I describe it as is, it's like the body became like an antenna, and the
Mm.
seraphim are somehow, whatever that is, which to me it's a crazy thing, but whatever that is, it's like this presence is attracted to that vibration.
Mhm.
So I'm putting out this love of God
Mhm.
vibration, and so what it appeared to as me, or to me, was almost like a fractal kind of being, which
Mhm.
had three parts to it. So they were these beautiful light fractal beings, and they were emanating this holy, holy, holy. Like they said that they burn eternally with the love of God,
Mhm.
and that and they basically said, we can show you what we are, and you can become like us. And so I said, okay, let's do it. Whatever you
Mhm.
guys are about, let's do it. And so the self structures started to burn with this white light, but it felt like like an actual atomic dissolution. So I've been through, like, every kind of letting go, and even with plant medicines, and there's dismantlings and death, die before you die. I know all that, but it really felt like whatever this was seemed like it was going to obliterate the self structure. It was actually, so maybe that was just another fear block on a very deep level. I'm not sure, but whatever it was, I had no choice. But a fear or a stop message came, where I was like, wait a minute, this is I didn't want to go any further. And the moment that fear came up, the whole thing stopped.
Wow.
They disappeared. So to me, I see, and there was no choosing in that. So it wasn't like I decided that. It was just like a fear just came, or there was something there that just stopped the process. So I see it as it was like an opportunity for something to
Mm-hmm.
happen. I honestly don't know if I would still be here if it had completed its process, which it's maybe not a problem. I don't know, but for whatever reason, there was a stopping there. Yeah,
I mean, that's just crazy. Like an experience like that, it's there's no other way to say it. It's crazy.
yeah,
And it's beautiful and it's so honorable at the same time to receive that kind of message. And I do think it's important to talk about these because you'll hear like these great masters give glimpses of these experiences that they have, but you just want to know more. Just just tell me the whole story. But
yeah,
I do think it's important because um, you know, after my awakening, I genuinely thought for a very long time that there was no other kind of awakening than the non-duality type.
yeah,
And as the subject of spirituality grows, the meaning of spiritual awakening also grows. And I was almost becoming like self-righteous and being like, no, that wasn't, I was very like, no, that's not a spiritual awakening. I had one, so I know what it is. Until I myself start to have different types of awakenings. And then
yeah,
that's where I was like, it humbled me because I was like,
yeah,
oh no, there's more than just awakening, but it does feel like it is the most important thing.
yeah,
It still does because when you're there, it feels like nothing else really matters.
yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's there's to me, like the kensho that we like when we work in self-inquiry, the idea is to find out who you are beyond name and form,
Hmm.
and that awakening to whatever that is that when the mind and body drop off, there's still a continuity or the ground, the
Yeah.
primordial ground. To me, that is the most important thing. Everything else is experience within the phenomenal world. But if we awaken to that ground, or Turiya, in Vedanta, what remains in deep sleep, when the mind and body have dropped off, if
Hmm.
there's a continuity of whatever that is, beingness or I amness, through that deep sleep cycle. Obviously, if the mind and body are gone, that's it. Like that's the ground. That's what remains.
Hmm.
So that's that's your original face before you were born. That's it. You know.
Yeah.
So so everything else is experience. Within the world of Maya,
Hmm.
and its infinite experiences,
Yeah.
beautiful. The possibilities for these non-dual experiences are just ever unfolding and ever deepening, as we grow and develop this avatar. Our capacity for those experiences expands. And at the beginning, when we have a kensho, it's like the self structure might not be fully developed. So it's like we're catching the experience part of it with like a little thimble.
Hmm.
It's like a waterfall, and we're trying to catch with a thimble. And yet, the truth of who we are is as it is.
Yeah.
It's the same knower of that experience, but yet we can expand, and we can catch more and more of that experience as our development progresses. And so the experience part of it is, it can be radically different. It's inconceivable to the little person, at the beginning of the path versus one at the end of the path. There's no, possibility to even know what that is like. And
Yeah.
yet, the knower of that
Is
entire
there.
continuum is the same. It's
Yeah.
you. It's you. You're the knower. So that awareness doesn't change. That I
Yeah.
amness doesn't change, but everything else changes radically.
Yeah. I feel like it's almost like the ocean, and we have all these like, currents and weather patterns and that are changing the waves, and but that's like your exterior. And then from the bottom of the ocean there's like this volcano, and it bubbles up. It's not fully erupted, but it bubbles up, and that's like your essence. It kind of comes up and down, and it's unaffected by all the exterior conditions that are going on. And
Mhm.
then eventually that volcano can erupt and become an island, and just you're emerged, that your true self has emerged from your little self, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, I think I want to talk a little bit about like the symptoms of awakening, like true symptoms, because nowadays with spirituality being such a popular theme, there's trendiness that goes on, and I feel like it gets a little skewed. But like from you who has truly had these symptoms. Again, it's experience from the human mind, but just to acknowledge it, I think can help people to be like, oh, that's what it feels like. I feel like, let me know if you had this, but one of the big symptoms that I had was this true sense of really remembering, just like, oh yeah, this is who I really am. And almost like you feel a little like caught off guard. You're almost kind of like, how could have I missed it? It's literally right here, and it's been there the whole time. And it's a
Yeah,
very real feeling. It's
yeah,
so real. Have you
yeah,
had that feeling of like, I
yeah,
remember who I really am now?
yeah, yeah. And that's, like in self-inquiry, I created a little video on the signs of Kensho, because
Mm,
I think it is really important to recognize a true Kensho, versus something that is just an experience.
mhm,
So what you're describing is that recognition. And people, I've had the beautiful privilege of seeing people go through awakenings
mm,
during the retreats. And maybe about 50 people in my lifetime I've witnessed a true
wow.
awakening or a true Kensho. And so the words can be different, for different people, but there's always this sense of surprise.
Hmm.
And it's like, wait a minute, like I've always been here. I've always been here. This is who I am.
Yeah.
How did I get identified with this character? And it's like I've been dreaming. I've been in this dream playing out this script almost, or caught in this character. And sometimes, when that awakening happens, there's a recognition that, for some people, that true self will have been present when they're like a little kid.
Hmm.
Like that true awareness or true self will be present, and then they become identified. They cultivate this ego and
Yeah.
get lost in the ego. And it's like they some, and this is not the same for everyone, but some people will feel like, wow, like I feel like I'm remembering who I was when I was that little kid, and it's
Mm,
like I've been lost in this character, and now I'm like back. I'm back. Like, what did I just do for the last 40 years or whatever, however long that was? Like what is going on? And for me, it was, so I had a glimpse of it at a self-inquiry dyad event. It was, they call an enlightenment intensive. And it was that recognition, and it was so mind-boggling to the conditioned mind, because it's like a cosmic joke. It's like, who I've been looking for has been here the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the key points is, so if someone is going through an experience, there might be, quite often, when it's in like an energetic experience, there's like a merging that seems to be happening. If someone is talking about, merging and energy, that's the experience part of it.
Mm.
But the true awakening is the recognition of that one that has always been there.
Yeah.
It's a recognition that, wow, like I have always been here, and
Yeah.
I'm just me. I'm
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
but we get caught in the phenomena. We get caught because quite often when the awakening happens, for some people, it can be just the awakening. It can just be very little fireworks, in terms of phenomena. Whereas for other people, it can be like, almost like a Kundalini awakening, where, the body will be shaking. It's like an energetic event. There's all kinds of stuff happening. And people will get caught in the phenomena of it and actually miss the most important thing,
Yeah.
that it's them,
Yeah.
it's who they are in that moment. And then, what happens is the mind will then start seeking, thinking it has to go through that every time, or, somehow reproduce that energy and
Yeah.
that event.
And I think this is why I have such a great respect for great teachers and such documentarists such as yourself, who is able to word this in such an eloquent way, because it's really hard to I tried to describe this to family and friends. It's impossible. Because imagine saying to somebody who doesn't know anything about spiritual awakening, oh yeah, I just remembered who I was. It sounds like gibberish. It sounds overly simplistic. And
Yeah,
they're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, no, no, it's this real sense of like, I remember who I really am, aside from what I think I am.
yeah,
And you just lose them. But
yeah.
it's hard
And,
to
and
explain.
and it seems like when you have the awakening, it seems like you could just tell people,
Yeah.
Like I've
Because it's
had
so
people.
obvious.
Yeah, and like I had one person at a retreat one time, and she actually got mad at me because she was like, "Why didn't you just tell us? Like it's just me. I'm
Yeah.
like I'm the one, And
Yeah.
it's like I have been telling you, all
That's
of
what
the
I'm trying to do.
all the teachers have been pointing to that,
Hmm.
but we can't hear it. And when I was at that enlightenment intensive, when I had the awakening, I was trying to tell people, I was going up to people and saying, it's just you, like it's you're the one you've been looking for. And they're just like, whoa, dude, okay, just like I don't know what you're talking about, but it
Ugh,
doesn't
that's
it doesn't
hilarious.
it doesn't make any sense. And yeah,
Yeah.
so it really is it's a stripping away process.
Yeah.
Like people, everybody has to go through that process, and until the veil drops,
Yeah.
and after it drops, like all the pointers make perfect sense.
Hmm.
But until that seeking mind, it will always just misunderstand the pointer.
Yeah.
Even if I say, this is such a fascinating phenomena, but if I say to someone, just let go of the doing,
Hmm.
you know, let go of the doing, let go of the seeking, the mind will hear that instruction, and
Hmm.
it'll do something to let go of the doing,
Yeah.
you know? So every instruction will be appropriated by the mind,
Yeah.
even letting go, it's like the mind will do something to
Yep.
try to let go.
It's
And
awful.
and it can't, yeah. So it's such a difficult thing. So for me, the only thing that I find works is, these retreats where people put themselves in conditions of no escape, where we're constantly, single-pointedly investigating into the true self,
Hmm.
and and it's that continuity of presence and letting go. It's like all forms of sadhana really work that,
Mm.
where there's a component where you're just being here now fully with whatever is arising,
Hmm.
and then just being okay with what is, whatever comes up from the depths in the, resistance within the self structure, or this purification process starts to happen. So the samskaras will come up to the surface, and if
Hmm.
we can be okay with whatever's arising, those two components, in yoga, it's dharana and dhyana, the single pointedness and the surrender, or the absorption into
Hmm.
whatever is arising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your retreat, I was supposed to go to one, I think 2 years ago, but I couldn't make it. But I saw that you're having an online one, in December.
That's right.
And I wanted to ask you, are you going to be doing more of the physical ones in the future, or are you going to be sticking to just sort of online retreats?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure.
Okay.
So at this point, the only thing I know for sure, so Lila and I are, we're really being drawn right now into our own sadhana.
Mm.
Like I've had all these awakenings. I've been on this path for 25 years, but I'm not liberated. I'm not
Mm.
a liberated being. And I now know kind of where I am on that continuum,
Hmm.
and where I am on that path. And it's a for me, and for Lila as well. We're just drawn to our own sadhana at this point,
Mm.
and putting a template in place, where it's like we know what our next year is going to look like, and
Okay.
and all of that. It feels like the energy is just not going there for that
Okay.
right now. So my answer is I really don't know.
Hmm.
I'm going to be doing whatever kind of supports my own practice,
Yeah.
and that may actually support the practice. I'm not sure. At some
Right.
point, doing long retreats tends to actually be a good accelerator sometimes. But
Mm.
at this point, it feels like, because we've been doing it as well, there are little patterns that have become active. Like it feels like something that needs to be let go of right now.
Mm.
You
Interesting.
know, and I've let go of it a few times, and it always comes back. so,
Ah, okay.
so I was going to actually sell the center at one point. I completely let it go. I had a buyer and everything,
Wow.
because it felt like the meditation retreats had become sort of crystallized in a pattern, and it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel authentic anymore. So I let
Mm.
it go, and then shortly after that, something new was reborn. We introduced new things. We did one final experiment, and that experiment was so amazing that it rekindled the energy, and then it went for a few more years, with some new energies and new modalities.
Would you mind sharing what that extra added element was? I have a feeling I know because I saw Angelo's podcast with you.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I had been doing traditional meditation, but so it was several components. I did one retreat, which I called the I Am retreat,
Hmm.
where I just put all my favorite things in it. So it was including a lot of sitting, but also including the self-inquiry dyads in the evenings, as well as my partner is an iboga provider. So iboga is a plant medicine, which is very unique. It's I would say the only one I've come across that seems to be made for meditation. It just
Wow.
seems to accelerate whatever's happening in meditation. So the purification of samskaras, it just sort of opens the unconscious
Mm,
so that the work can continue.
yeah.
So it's not for the faint of heart. It's doing the retreat without a boga is challenging,
Yeah.
but doing it with it just accelerates it even more. So there's a real dismantling that was happening at these retreats.
Wow.
And people were being taken right apart,
Huh.
which but it was incredible, and it was a real acceleration. And then my friend Chad is a 5-MeO facilitator as well, so we would do 5-MeO DMT at the end of the retreat, which
Hmm.
is just an opportunity for a deep letting go and like a non-dual kind of experience.
Yeah.
It's again very mysterious how it works, but it's if there are things that sometimes can't be touched in any other way, it can touch them. It
Yeah.
can help to really dismantle things. And we threw in breath work and different things as well at the retreat. So it was like every possible thing for doing the work was all in one retreat.
That's
And
beautiful.
we had to be very careful, obviously, because certain people were ready for this kind of retreat, but it also
Mm,
our screening process had to be
thorough.
very thorough and ramped up because even just self-inquiry on its own, if the psyche isn't stable, if there's deep healing work or a certain degree of trauma in the body or psychological illnesses like bipolar, schizophrenia, all of that,
Hmm.
it's better to focus on healing that
Yeah.
first, because if we try to awaken from a psyche that's already destabilized,
Mm,
it's going to destabilize it even more. So,
yeah. I know what you mean. I've dabbled with, well, I have done ayahuasca and I can see how powerful it is. It's certainly not a joke, and especially for people who are very already naturally more open,
yeah.
like me, it can really come in very strongly. So I can understand that, but I also think it's called plant medicine for a reason because it
Mhm.
really is a medicine. It heals you on the mind, body, heart level. And I think it's brilliant, this new introduction to these retreats, because I feel like the more people are progressing, there's less judgment on or like stereotypical like ideas of what plant medicine is and what DMT is. But once you understand what it does, it can be truly life-changing.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm here with you here for a reason.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's mysterious. It's almost like there are these little, I feel like certain plant medicines, they are like teachers,
Yeah.
like literally my, this sounds crazy, but my meditation teacher was my first true meditation teacher. I had a really good one at the Zen Center as well, but my first true direct teacher was a plant. It was a, a flower called
Oh, yeah.
datura, which somehow communicated with me
Mm,
directly, showed me what meditation is, and I had my first experience of absolute unblinking presence by somehow synchronizing with this plant teacher. So anything is possible. It's
Yeah.
and the cool thing is, like, when we're in that state, when we're in the samadhi state, it's obvious that there really is no plant teacher. There really is no inner and outer. It's all this one mind sort of communicating with itself.
Hmm.
So from the limited self, it seems like there are these teachers and plant medicines, but I feel more like they're like permission slips when we're ready. It's just opening up to more of ourselves,
Yeah.
and we there are many different permission slips we can give ourselves.
Yeah.
So plant,
Endless, really.
yeah,
Sometimes it's a thought that triggers it. Sometimes it's observing a flower. But I feel like the observation of a flower, awakening through the observation of a flower, that's really, it's written in many, many texts of great teachers who've used this reference of a flower through the
yeah.
observation. And um, you are the second person who have told me that have awakened, who had the experience of awakening by observing a flower. And my mom actually had an awakening through observing a flower as well. And her story, the way that she explained it, it totally makes sense, just like the way that you did as well. And it's fascinating. I've never had that yet, but when I look at a flower, I definitely look at it more differently now. There's like this deeper understanding that it's a being and it's yeah, like you said, it's one with you. But
And the datura, so it actually has sort of psychedelic or shamanic
oh,
properties. So so what happened? So I'll maybe complete the story because I didn't fully
okay.
explain. So like datura is it's actually insanely potent. If you were to make a datura tea, they call it the local plant because you can in Mexico where I was, because if you it can actually trigger psychosis. It's one of the most
Mm,
powerful entheogens. So I didn't ingest it, but I didn't realize, like my wife, who I was married to at the time, she thought they were beautiful and they are very fragrant. So she brought a whole bunch of them into our room, and the room was saturated with the smell of datura.
oh, so you inhaled some
And
of it.
so it was inhaling its fragrance, and so I went to sleep, like lie down in bed, and then at a certain point, I guess I breathed in so much of this, and I sat up in bed, and I was in this state of
Yeah.
absolute presence, and it was, and I could
Mm,
see, and it was a communication with the flower, so I could see this white datura, and there was like an unblinking black eye in the middle
mm. Oh,
of
wow.
the vision, because I was sort of seeing it through the third eye, and then it merged with my third eye, and I became the datura,
Yeah, wow.
and I just sat in unmoving presence for a long period of time. And it told me its name. I didn't even know its name at the time. Like, we just thought there's these pretty flowers,
Right.
but it actually said datura. And then the next morning I Googled it,
Wow.
and I got a picture, and I was like, wait, there was like one right on the stand right beside the computer, and I was like, that's crazy. It actually told me its name.
That's crazy. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like a direct message.
yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I
Um,
found out later. So in India, these same flowers are associated with Shiva, which is, Shiva is unmoving, pure consciousness.
mhm.
So that was like a decade. I found that out later.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Fascinating.
yeah.
Um, Dan, I feel like I could go on talking to you for like hours on end. It's such a shame that we only have 2 hours, but I have so many things I wanted to cover with you, but I had written them down and I do want to ask you, I guess, like, what is Sadhana? I know that you've touched upon it a little bit, but and I know that you're currently in the middle of creating the fourth part of the Samadhi series called Sadhana. And
Mhm.
so, and you're in it at the same time,
Mhm.
which is sort of a not a coincidence, but it's just working as like everything in your life right now, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's a big question,
Yeah, I'm sure.
and it's very, the answer is so there's a sort of a two-part answer, and I kind of alluded to it earlier when I talked about like the turning point on the path once we have an awakening. So I would say there's sadhana before awakening and sadhana after awakening.
Mm.
So before awakening, it's it's basically whatever gets you to awakening. so
Okay.
so it's whatever comes on our path, if it's doing meditation, whatever that means before awakening. It might be doing a vipassana technique. It might be doing shamatha meditation. It might be doing kriya yoga practice. It might be doing anything that is cultivating single pointedness, presence, and surrender. So anything could be sadhana if it's used that way.
Hmm.
So like a dance practice, if you use it in that way where you're sort of getting yourself out of the way and allowing the energy to unfold and moving beyond resistance, all of that, and being present with what's arising. So there's an infinite number of practices that could be used as sadhana. And then once we have an awakening, once we find out who we are, sadhana becomes just abiding as who we are.
Mm.
So we go from this doer and doing, like I'll use the meditation practice as an example. Before awakening, it seems like there's something to do in meditation.
Mhm.
It seems like if we go to Vipassana, they teach this body scan. There's purifying of samskaras, all of that, and but after awakening, there's nothing to do. It's sadhana. Actually, like the root of it is, it actually means just practicing the truth.
Mhm.
Practicing being truly who you are. And so it's simply abiding as the self, and there's an ongoing unfolding still. So after we have an awakening, it doesn't mean the self structure is purified of samskaras. There's still this ongoing sadhana, but there's an end to the doing and the doer.
Mhm.
So meditation, there's no more meditator. There's no more activity that you could call meditation, where there's a sense that I'm doing meditation.
Yeah.
Meditation is simply being, simply
Yeah.
being. And then, the energy will go to town then, if we're just abiding as presence, there's still a rewiring. There might be, things coming up that need to be seen, patterns. For me, self-inquiry is still part of my sadhana.
Mhm.
Lila, lately we get together every day. We do self-inquiry, and it's revealing, patterns that are huge life patterns that are
Mm.
still, even after 25 years of
Yeah.
this, a lot of stuff around relationships. I've been through an 8-year marriage, and long-term relationships, and it all, they always say it all goes back to your parents and your mother,
Mm.
but this pattern of seeking something in the external you know, going, it's even though we know that's happening. Like I've known, I did back in university. I was studying Freud and Jung, and I know how it works intellectually, but yet it's still in play in the
Yeah.
unconscious, and there's this deep wanting of something. There's a sense of wanting some completion by having a partner, an external partner, and to get some sort of fulfillment from the external. So these are the types of patterns, and to me this is all the sadhana. This is all bringing these big picture motivations in our life that are, the things that are really shaping the direction of how the character, moves through life. Bringing that all into consciousness, and seeing where we're still giving energy to these
Yeah.
different patterns.
There's something that you said that rang so true, and I think that is one of the main symptoms is you reach this place where you really do feel like there's nothing to do because you're so complete in your being. You're like, this is it. And then whatever you decide to do is like almost like well, might as well do something. It's like you're so full in your being that you're like, there's nothing to do because I'm already complete. You feel this completeness, this fullness, and it's very much alive. And then you're like, well, might as well go for a walk, might as well do this. It's like everything else seems so not insignificant, but almost like it's not about the doing. It's where the doing is coming from. And then it
Yeah,
changes the experience completely.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, to
Yeah.
me, those times that I've been in the samadhi state, there's really this sense of like a just happeningness to
Yeah.
everything. And I remember doing, I probably the most poignant experience of it was, I did a retreat here at the center one time, which there was just a lot of meditation happening, and there was this sense, like they say, like Krishnamurti, for example, your true nature awareness doesn't choose; it's choiceless awareness.
Hmm.
Like who you are doesn't choose. So
Hmm.
when you're in that samadhi state, I remember seeing like the Dan character, just doing its thing, and when there's no sense of I wrapped up in it, it's like the energy just does its thing, and it's so beautiful how it
Yeah.
moves and how. So it was like this almost a fascination of watching, and it's like, okay, here he goes. He's gonna get his favorite tea. Oh, look at that! He's pouring the tea, and it's like, oh, look at the way the hand moves,
Yeah.
and it's like everything is happening, and it's being perceived like directly.
Yeah.
There's no filter happening. It's just this direct perceiving of
Hmm.
what's actually happening, and yeah, it's just there's no chooser in
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's just happening. There's no sense that I am choosing, even though obviously the character is choosing.
Hmm.
There's a favorite tea. It goes for food that will sustain the body in the right way, right? A certain diet, everything, all of that. It's not like that's drops away or is forgotten, but there's a sense that I am not choosing. You know,
Yeah.
who I am, I'm aware,
Yeah.
and then life is just moving through. It's just happening, and the energy is doing its thing, and
Yeah.
and it's yeah, it's the most beautiful
Yeah.
way of just being. And
That's, I think, the true definition of bliss. I think
mhm.
bliss is kind of a word that's been thrown around a lot, but I think that is the epitome of bliss. And you're in this blissful state, and you're like, you're kind of in like this constant state of mesmerization.
Yeah. And it's just bliss, without a cause.
Yeah.
It could be the most mundane thing
Hmm.
happening,
Doing the dishes. It's always when I'm doing the
yeah,
dishes.
yeah. It's uncaused, it's just whatever is happening here in this moment. If we have a direct experience of that,
Yeah.
the direct experience of anything is
Yeah.
is is bliss. Yeah.
So, one last question, but are you at a stage, I should say, where you're almost able to choose to operate from a place of being? Because sometimes I feel myself like it's almost like a calling. I feel like it's there. I just have to transfer streams of consciousness and be like, I could tap into it whenever I want. But then when I do it too much, then it goes away because it becomes an idea again. But
Mhm.
is that something that, are you awakened right now? What is it? I don't even know how to question this.
Yeah, like to me, so the way I kind of measure is, if I look back at life, you know, how much suffering am I creating, or how often do I get snagged by the
Mm,
mind? You
hmm.
know, and I just stay in a don't know mind. Because
Mm,
I don't feel like I'm beyond anything. The I that would feel that, who is that I?
yeah.
When I look back at life, I would say there's way less getting snagged, by the mind. There's less suffering. There's less pathological thinking, just less thinking
Hmm.
happening on its own.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in sadhana, working with Lila, with self-inquiry, sometimes what hasn't been purified will come up to the surface,
Hmm.
and there can be an identification. There has to be an identification
Hmm.
in order for that to come up. Because if
Yeah.
we're sitting there thinking I'm beyond this, or I'm awake, then that belief, that's just the mind thinking. It's just a belief.
Yeah.
So those deeper levels of mind will never get purified if we're holding on to a belief like that. So
Mm.
just a week ago in our self-inquiry practice, something that wasn't on my radar came up, from the unconscious. I found the Dan character sort of taking the driver's seat. In order for that samskara to come up, it sort of took hold,
Hmm.
and it was it was caught after maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes,
Yeah.
and it allowed that energy actually to become free again, and
Mm.
and to move, and there was a great opening and a great clarity again after that. So
Wow.
it felt like an unburdening of whatever, and something that had been carried deep in the unconscious.
Hmm.
And so I always now, I've been humbled so many times on the path. I just say, I don't know what I don't know.
Hmm.
I do I know? Is there more to purify? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
probably, because based on my past experience, there always is. So, is there an end to it? I don't know. Maybe. Is there a point on the path where the inner lotus is fully grown, and like the yogis say, the energy flows spontaneously from the root to the
Hmm.
crown, and life is effortless from that point on. I
Yeah.
haven't experienced that. I haven't. A sahaja samadhi is the most rare of flowerings. So,
Mm.
according to the all the teachers and teachings. So I don't know what's possible,
Yeah.
but I know enough to know that I think to be awake is to be truly aware of the mind's delusion. And,
Hmm.
and that's it, you know, like just we know
Start there.
we start and stay there, like it's the beginning and end of the path. I think it's like the mind's delusion is so
Strong.
huge, so strong.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like the greatest teachers have all said, you know, like Suzuki Roshi, you know, talked about beginner's mind, or you know, even Plato, or Socrates said, you know, I only know that I don't know.
Hmm.
These are like, to me, that is the pinnacle of truth.
Yeah.
Because as soon as the mind becomes a knowing mind, then you know it has power. I'm just going to have a
Yeah.
drink here.
Yeah.
My
Um, no, I feel like I have more tendency to listen to teachers who always start with, this is my truth, and it's one way of pointing. And when there's like this humility of like, I don't know, I don't take everything for granted, whatever I'm gonna say, take it with a grain of salt, or I don't know everything. When they start with this humility, it opens up this like, I don't know, this vastness for me to jump into right away, rather than if somebody claims to have, the whole truth and all the truth.
yeah,
But
yeah,
okay, I know I said that that was the last question, but I have one last question.
yeah, sure, sure.
But I just have to ask this, but because it is a global phenomenon, and I feel like this has been a message that I received 10 years ago, and it hasn't left my mind because I feel like it might be part of my dharma or whatnot, but it really is this mass awakening, and it's the new earth. And I know that there's a link between the two, because the mass awakening that's what's probably going to bring about the new earth. What is your knowledge on this, and what is I know that we're sort of getting out of like the core of the subject, but I think it could give still like a good overview on what's going on planetary wise, and maybe even galactic wise, who knows, but what is going on? Why are so many people awakening right now at this time? And you hear plenty of things. Oh, we're entering the Aquarius age, the golden age, all this stuff. What is going on right now? Because there's obviously something going on.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, in terms of Aquarius and the yugas, you know, there's the Kali Yuga and the Dwapara Yuga, all that. I don't know. I don't know any of that stuff. But what I see happening, it seems like, you know, within the last few years, especially, it seems like the collective unconscious is starting to come into view. So to me, what seems to be happening is that you know, all of the things like the egoic operations that we've been engaged in collectively, you know, all of the capitalist agenda and the, you know, all the different levels, you know, in society, like the religions, you have, you know, the political structures, educational structures. There's been a lot of you know, it's been egoic consciousness really that has been driving the show, and for a long period of time, the sort of shadow of that egoic consciousness wasn't really seen. And now it's like that shadow is being brought into the light. So we're seeing on every level now the corruption and the distasteful aspects of these structures. And pretty much every structure out there is an egoic consciousness structure. So to come out of that into something new, you know, the first step is to see how we're operating on the planet,
Hmm.
the truth of how we're operating. And
Yeah.
the truth is, you know, we're operating mostly out of egoic interest, out of greed, and it's a level of consciousness that is now it's being exposed
Mm-hmm.
fully. So the suffering on the planet right now is increasing as this is happening. It's
Yeah.
like I see it as like a collective dark night of the soul
Mm.
that is coming, and I think we have a longer journey ahead with that. I think it's just starting,
Yeah.
really. But the question is how do we sort of manage that? If as it unfolds, it could, like if I look at on a personal level, if I have an understanding of what the dark night is, then it goes a lot more smoothly. It's like
Yeah.
if I understand that this is actually a purification process, and that this, if I resist, what you resist persists. So
Yeah.
if there's this little me fighting, trying to get back to the way things were, trying to get back to that egoic consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and live a life that was whatever I experienced previously, it was better, then there's going to be friction, there's going to be suffering, huge
Yeah.
suffering, but if we collectively see that this is actually a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
that we can actually recreate a world here that is not based on greed and egoic interest, then I think that transition could be smooth,
Yeah.
eventually. Yeah.
And which would be the new earth, basically the new heaven being this consciousness, the internal state, and then manifesting into a new earth.
Yeah.
In one of your interviews, I might wanna end it with this, but you said a beautiful thing, and I think you just summed it up. You answered the question I'm about to ask, but the quote that you said was something along the lines of awakening is the solution to every single aspect of life,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
every problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And so if our leaders who are leading, the world right now,
Hmm.
if they're, awake, and they're, if you once you see the truth that,
Yeah,
this whole matrix is just like a game of hide and seek.
yeah,
It's this one awareness. So if truly, all compassion, all true compassion flows from that direct realization of our true nature.
hmm,
If I see you as literally me, just, in a different avatar,
hmm.
then, I'm not going to be bad to myself.
Right.
I'm not going to, prioritize, the interests of one over the other. It's like I see the game.
Yeah,
I see what's actually happening here. And so I think like true compassion begins, for everyone with their own awakening. Everyone has to
right.
go through this sort of dismantling of the ego, and if our leaders were awake,
Yeah.
then it's not about, one country versus another, or one,
Party. Yeah,
political party. All of that falls away, and
yeah.
yeah, and it's, these affiliations really are strong egoic interests, and
Yeah.
we're seeing that right now. Like it's crazy, what's going on, the polarization, and
Yeah.
but I think that polarization sometimes, when we fully see it and see, I see how, people I know, even who are on the spiritual path, they're getting to the point where they can't even stand their own biases,
Right.
let alone other people's biases. Once it gets to a certain point, it becomes clear how we're operating. And
Yeah.
I think right now there's, everything is like a big mirror, and it's all pointing back. And I actually heard something really cool somebody shared it with me. It was a clip of Donald Trump, believe it or not. On
Dan, I was just going to tell you that. I was waiting for you to
Really?
finish. Yes, I'm.
You're kidding?
Are you
Okay.
talking about the ayahuasca?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
You tell me yours and I'll
Sorry.
tell you mine. But this one was yeah, he was just talking about the Russia situation and all of that, and it's the first time he said, all these European leaders see Russia as the biggest threat to the world and everything, and he actually said something like, I feel like the biggest threat is actually us. He actually
Mm,
owned it. He were like on behalf of America, I
wow.
guess. But he actually said, I think, NATO and all of this, the biggest threat in the world, we have to look at ourselves, basically. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's that's
Sometimes
that's really interesting. Really.
sometimes the best spiritual quotes actually come from non-spiritual people. Like, um, I mean, I don't know how spiritual Mike Tyson is, but he has a saying where Eckhart Tolle even quotes him, and he says, when I'm nobody, I'm at peace. But the second I'm somebody, I'm disrupted. I'm corrupted.
Wow.
And it's
Yeah.
coming from Mike Tyson, who literally just had a fight with with
Yeah.
Jake Paul. That's interesting. But
Yeah. That's
I'm
beautiful.
gonna share the Donald Trump video with you. It's just a
Okay.
little AI video that somebody made, and it's just he
Okay.
goes on an ayahuasca trip, and it completely transforms him into like this spiritual guy. It's really
That's
awesome. I'll send it to you.
okay. Cool.
Um, I want to end this call by saying how much I appreciate this call because it is so rare to find another awakened or enlightened being and to have conversations one to one. It is so refreshing to have this conversation with somebody who actually knows what I'm talking about. Because all I see is videos and I read books about it, but no one directly. I did have one teacher mentor before, but he moved to Korea. And it's been an honor, honestly, to have this conversation with you, to know you, and to call you a friend. And there's this thing I think called it's actually like a spiritual practice to have two spiritual people talking about the truth. And I think this whole session has been a spiritual practice for me the entire time. I'm a clairsentient, and I have not. My vibes have been a little lower these days, and I haven't felt the vibrations lately. But just talking throughout the entire conversation, just f on top of my head twirlings like it's incredible. So I want to thank you, and before I let you go I do want to promote your next documentary Sadhana, so we could if we could take a look at it together in presence.
This film is a wake-up bell that tolls for you to awaken within the dream of life. Sadhana, an ancient Sanskrit word, points to the practices that lead to true awakening. But here's the paradox. There's nothing to do except become aware of what your conditioned mind is already doing. The operations of the mind are realized to be empty of self. These operations are sensations, perceptions, reactions, as well as the witnessing part of the mind. Sadhana, regardless of the technique or practice, is simply making all of these unconscious mind processes conscious. Through single-pointed presence and deep surrender to what is.
It transcends any single spiritual system or tradition. In its pure essence, it invites you to let go of everything you know, to enter a don't know mind. Imagine letting go of duality, of good and bad, of that evaluating mind, letting go of preferences, the very root of the I thought. This is radical. A complete reversal from the relentless, goal-oriented pursuits of modern life. The you that you think you are must fail. Surrender. Move from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. What emerges is life itself. The great reality, the kingdom always here, yet which has been obscured by the chaotic whirlpool of the mind. This truth can't be known or understood by the analytical mind because the analytical mind is the filter, the reducing valve that creates the illusion of separation. We may start with practices, with techniques that interrupt the pattern of you, clearing unconscious patterns or samskaras. But eventually, in sadhana, you even let go of the practices. The purpose of sadhana is to reveal the unconscious processes of the mind. But these very practices, if misunderstood, can become part of the unconscious mind if the ego becomes attached to them, creating a spiritualized ego. Awakening is not something to attain. It is a recognizing, an awakening to what you've always been. In this space of openness, of stillness, you create the optimal conditions for awakening to your true nature. Why engage in sadhana? Why awaken? We awaken to be free of suffering, to live a life that is unscripted and not robotic, to end the dream of the separate self, and to come to the kingdom that is here now, to find true peace that is not contingent on anything in the matrix of the mind.
I'm really looking forward to watching that. Is it also going to be on Gaia?
It is, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
It'll be on
so
YouTube and everything as well. So,
perfect. So
yeah.
where can people find you? Where
Mhm.
can people find your content, and how do they, yeah, have access to all your content?
Yeah, so everything is sort of on awakentheworld.com. So all the films, there's guided meditations on there. There's also a community, the Awaken the World community. So it's like a group where people can connect, and there's all different topics people can share, and they're sharing their artwork and music, or just talking about the path and sadhana and their own practice, and also. Yeah, on that site, there's just pointers to other teachings. We have daily meditation. So if you want to join our group, there's every morning there's 2 different sit periods where you can just sit in silence with the group. And then there's monthly events. I do sometimes guided meditations or self-inquiries, and then we have retreats and all different events as well. So people can check out all that stuff.
Amazing. Dan, I want to thank you so much for this time with me. Yeah, I feel like there are no words to be said what this exchange has been, because everything is. But thank you so much. And I will hopefully see you very soon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been fun.